Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North Kesteven series. This is a large Lincolnshire district centred around the town of Sleaford. There's 75 parishes here, so let's take a look at one of them. Welcome back to North Kesteven, everybody. It's a nice sunny morning where I am at the moment. We'll see how long that lasts because there is some rain forecast a little bit later. So yeah, we'll see if we get wet by the end of this one. Hopefully not, hopefully not. It's nice that the sun's out because it's putting this place in a fantastic light right now. There's lots to cover in this one. This is the beautiful village and parish of Scopwick. The North Kesteven series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Scopwick Sheep Farm. In North Kesteven this week, we're beginning a run of villages that are just to the south of Metheringham and to the north of Ruskington. They're all nestled in the open, flat Lincolnshire countryside, but they've definitely got a few stories to tell us. Perhaps none more so than this one. With its name literally meaning sheep farm, deriving from the Old English words scape and wick, this is Scopwick. By far one of the prettiest that North Kesteven has to offer, Scopwick sits on a picturesque stream which cuts the village into two pieces. We'll be seeing that watery landmark several times on our journey around this one. Within the parish boundaries here there are two other settlements. One is Kirkby Green, which used to be the principal village out here, but it's now dwarfed by its much larger neighbour. It remains popular though with railway enthusiasts for two reasons. The second settlement is all related to the RAF. Right on the boundary with Ashby de la Launde is RAF Digby, a World War II bomber station which is now used by various signals units. It used to briefly be under Canadian control. The village cemetery contains 49 war graves, mainly airmen from the base, and they include the final resting place of a well-known wartime poet. So there's lots here then. Let's get cracking, shall we? This is Scopwick. To begin today's episode, we're driving into the village via Heath Road. Out here, we're right on Scopwick's western boundary with Ashby de la Launde and Bloxham. On that border is RAF Digby, and if you keep your eyes to the left of the screen, you'll see some of its buildings. The funny thing is, the base is nowhere near the village after which this is named, but there's a reason for that. RAF Digby used to be known as RAF Scopwick. Formerly a training and fighter airfield, it's one of the country's older Royal Air Force stations, predated only by RAF Northolt, which is the oldest and predates the RAF by 3 years. Flying at RAF Digby ceased in 1953. However, the base remains active and you can't enter it unless you live on the housing estate that's joined to it or your children attend Tedder Primary School, which is also within the grounds. So, as such, it's a case of driving straight past this rather than stopping. But here's a bit more about the base. The site on which RAF Digby stands has been in use since at least 1917. Early photographs show contemporary hangars, sheds and various aircraft around its old grass runways. The first units to be based here came from Huntingdonshire, bringing with them Handley Page bombers. The aerodrome was deemed officially open with their arrival in March 1918, 4 days before the RAF was officially formed. The only action seen by RAF Scopwick during World War I was when a German Zeppelin attempted a bombing raid, with its bombs missing the station and falling in a nearby field. Between the wars, the base closed for a short period, but was active again before the onset of World War II. Between 1929 and 1936, its appearance changed dramatically, and most of the original wooden hangars, barrack blocks and offices were demolished and replaced with substantial brick structures. Some of these still stand today. At some point during that time, RAF Scopwick became RAF Digby. In 1937, it became an operational fighter station intended to provide cover for the cities of Lincoln, Nottingham and Leicester. Squadrons based here included numbers 46, 73 and 504, flying a mixture of Gloucester Gladiators and Gauntlets and Hawker Hurricanes. October 1939 saw a number of arrivals at the station, the most notable being number 29 Squadron with the soon-to-be famous officer Guy Gibson. Gibson was still based at Digby in 1940 when he got married in Penarth, South Wales. For a brief 3-year period, Digby was under the control of the Royal Canadian Air Force. In 1945, control of the station was handed back by the Canadians, but the station's badge showed an autumn gold maple leaf to permanently acknowledge its history as a Canadian facility. After World War II, Digby increasingly took on a non-flying role for the RAF's Technical Training Command. All flying ceased in 1953, but the base remains active. It's now in use by various signals units. The first to arrive was Signals Unit number 399 in 1955. This was quickly followed by number 591, and both set up operations in the former aircraft hangars and the old gymnasium. In 1959, the Wireless Operators School and the Aerial Erectors School were established at Digby to begin training their respective students. The station continued to expand its scope of operations steadily from the 1970s onwards and into the new millennium. British Army elements arrived in 1994 and were later joined by the Royal Navy. In 2014, number 54 Signals Unit was established here. It provides processing, exploitation and dissemination of all UK air-derived electronic surveillance data. The unit forms part of the Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance Wing, headquartered at RAF Waddington. So all in all, you can see why they still don't want any uninvited guests. Moving away from the airbase, now we're heading into Scopwick village. Before we get there though, we have to pass an old windmill. Now renovated and lived in privately, the windmill is one of the tallest in this part of Lincolnshire. It was built in 1827 and fell into disuse in around 1912. Although painted black, it's made of red brick and stands some 6 stories tall. Its cap and sails have long since gone, but later in the village we will get to see what it once looked like. We begin our walk at the eastern end of the village in a residential cul-de-sac called Springfield Estate. A mixture of modern houses and bungalows, Springfield Estate is typical of how Scopwick has grown in recent times. The main part of the village though is defined by its long and much older main street. There are 2 roads here, side by side. One is Main Street, the other is Brookside. Between the two is a pretty little limestone stream called Scopwick Beck. Shallow and generally straight as it passes through the village, it terminates at Kirkby Green, where there was once a watermill. This little information board tells you a bit about the stream and some of the wildlife usually found in or around it. I reckon it's the best thing about Scopwick personally. Facing it on Brookside is the village hall. This is well used by both the residents of Scopwick and those of Kirkby Green too. Usually on a Thursday, this hosts a coffee morning. Note the plaque on the wall. That's in reference to Scopwick's twin, Scaep, located in the Pays de la Loire region of northwestern France. Outside the hall is the parish notice board, and we all know what that means by now. Get it marked off, folks. Now to the church dedicated to Holy Cross. This is essentially a 13th century building, but it was extensively restored in the 19th century. The tower is early English in its lower stages and 17th century above, whilst the nave has 3 bay early English arcades. Inside this one is a monument of a cross-legged knight, which dates to the 14th century. The chancel dates back to 1884, and in the same year, the south porch was rebuilt as a memorial to Mrs. Hall of Scopwick Vicarage. Standing tall in the churchyard is a war memorial, a Celtic wheel cross originally dedicated to all those lost in World War I. Now, as regards war graves, as well as the war memorial, there's a notable grave we will be seeing a little bit later around this route. It's in a cemetery that's not actually within the grounds of the churchyard. It's a separate cemetery. We'll catch that towards the end of this route. Next, we're just going to follow Scopwick back for a bit further as we head down towards the Royal Oak pub. Now we go across the beck again and back to Brookside. In doing so, we pass the allotments. That'll keep the fans happy for another day. Next to them is a little garden. I'm not sure if this is communal or not, but regardless, you can't deny it's pretty. Brookside continues and winds its way to a small opening where there's a second information board. This one tells you that the land around here was historically really good for sheep farming. The clue is in the village name, of course. There's some great historical pictures on this too, including this one that shows Scopwick Mill with its cap and sails. The board also tells you about how part of Scopwick was once owned by the Blankney estate. That's why some houses have their distinctive green doors and window ledges. Now we come to the one and only pub here. This is the Royal Oak, which dates back to the early 18th century, and its fabric and structure still remain very much unchanged today. At one time, the building also took on the role of a post office and sorting office for deliveries to and from Lincoln and Sleaford, and provided a vital wartime service for RAF Digby and RAF Waddington too. Later, the pub also became a village shop. Once over the Lincoln Road, Brookside becomes Beckside, a narrow dead end which turns into a footpath and runs to Heath Road. There isn't a lot to say about this area. We're effectively passing the rear of the houses on Heath Road in order to form a loop that'll take in a garage and point us in the right direction for the cemetery. At least it was a pleasant trot for 5 minutes, with only the sound of the birds in the trees for company. In any event, we emerge onto Heath Road. Follow this to the west and you'll be at Scopwick Mill in no time. RAF Digby is about half a mile further down the road. This area has a few of these little history fact boards. This one's about the ancient practice of beating the bounds. According to it, holes were dug at the angles of the boundary of the parish and boys were lowered into them, head first, to impress the position of the holes on their minds. That would never be a thing these days. We've now reached Brack's Garage, which is the shortened name for L. Brackenbury & Son. Established in 1944 and now a third-generation local service, Brack's repair cars and light commercial vehicles and even sell petrol and diesel too. They're pretty vital out here. So if you're needing a bus into Sleaford from here, you can catch a bus right here at this stop. The 31 and the 31X are the services you need that will take you into the town in the heart of North Kesteven. Now, for us, we're continuing on foot. We're not catching a bus. We're taking a left turn and then a right turn at the end of this road. It'll take us towards that cemetery we were talking about earlier. Here's the granaries, and that's a name that does more than just suggest something. These buildings were literally grain stores, which have now been transformed into family homes. Over Lincoln Road we go now to Vicarage Lane, where a sign points us towards some war graves. We'll get to them shortly, but the vicarage itself is first. Within its garden, there's a fragment of a mid-10th or early 11th century sculpture, believed to have originated from either Catley Priory or a Saxon church at Kirkby Green. Nobody really seems to know, but it is an interesting feature nonetheless. So here we are at the cemetery, located 250 metres north of the church. For the most part, this is a modest burial ground, but dominating most of it are 49 war graves belonging to airmen from RAF Digby and RAF Colby Grange. As war graves go, they're all important, but the one that stands out among them is that of John Gillespie McGee Jr. He was a fighter pilot and a member of the Royal Canadian Air Force. He was also a poet, and it was he who penned the sonnet High Flight. McGee was killed in an accidental mid-air collision over the nearby hamlet of Wroxholm in 1941. Next to the cemetery is a small playground and sports field, and that's really it for Vicarage Lane. After these, the road turns into a grass track, and we can walk along this because it's a public right-of-way. It loops around the edge of Springfield Estate and brings you back to Main Street again. The building you'll see at the end is a former care home called the Limes, which was owned by Abel Grange. It closed in 2016 after being deemed inadequate, and it's never reopened. Before it became a care home, the older part of it was Scopwick's public elementary school, which opened in 1866. And that's going to do us for the main walk around the village of Scopwick. But the parish has another settlement within its boundaries, and it's called Kirkby Green. Let's go out there because there's two things which are railway related. One of them is an actual railway line. The other one, I think you're going to love. On the way to Kirkby Green, we pass through the remainder of Scopwick, and our last landmark is a former Wesleyan chapel. This dates from 1905, and it's the second Wesleyan chapel that Scopwick has had to its name. The original was built in 1839, and this one was erected to replace it, presumably because the old one was too small. It has an attached schoolroom, but both structures are currently disused. It's a little bit of an eyesore at present, but hopefully it'll look better soon. After passing a small caravan park on the road into it, we're now in Kirkby Green. Don't be fooled by its size. Kirkby Green might be small, but it's got a few things to see. Believe it or not, this was originally the principal village in the parish, but its status has diminished somewhat now, given the rapid rise and expansion of Scopwick. Kirkby Green's name is literally a reference to a church. It means church by the green. We'll catch the church at the end of this little journey through the place. Despite its original status, Kirkby Green has never had a school. Children have always had to travel elsewhere. Scopwick once had the local school, of course, but it's now gone. Kirkby Green used to be a parish in its own right. It was abolished and merged with Scopwick in 1931, forming the boundaries we have today. It's mostly residential, and a lot of people just simply drive through this to get to some other place. I promise you though, it's well worth stopping here, and I'm going to show you why. If you go all the way through Kirkby Green, you'll eventually come to a railway line. We're familiar with this one. This is the Peterborough to Lincoln line, which has made several appearances before in places such as Potterhamworth, Metheringham and Dunstan. As you can see, the barriers came down just as I arrived, and that was a good excuse to hop out and catch the train that was due. If you cross the railway line here, you're met with the site of a former station. This was Scopwick and Timberland, which opened in 1882 and closed in 1955 for passengers. It did though remain open until 1964 for goods. Even though the line's still open, you can't catch a mainline train in Scopwick anymore. However, you can still board a train here, if you know where to go. I'm talking about a very popular miniature railway, which is quite the local tourist attraction. Let's have a look at it. And here it is. As you drive back into Kirkby Green, you see on the left hand side the miniature railway, and there it is. You should just be able to see it between the road and the signal box there. There's the signal box. Let's get a bit closer and see what we can see. We're not going to go into it, it's not open today anyway, but yeah, we'll see exactly what we can capture of this. It's brilliant. The Kirkby Green Light Railway can be found at Watermill Cottage, and it's open usually on Sundays and bank holidays throughout the summertime. The line and all its workings were built by railway enthusiast Stuart Ravel. It has almost 2 miles of track, and it's all fully controlled by semaphore and colour light signals, operated from not just one, but 2 signal boxes. It has 5 steam locomotives and 3 diesels, which all run on a 10¼ inch gauge layout. The KGLR attracts people from all over the country. In 2017, it was even visited by a party from the London Transport Museum. So one last job then here in Kirkby Green, and that's to get a look at its church, which you can see behind me over that low wall. It's the ideal place to finish because this road will take us towards our next episode. Let's go and have a look at the church. Like its much bigger neighbour in Scopwick, Kirkby Green's church is dedicated to the Holy Cross. Parts of this building go back to the 13th century, but it was largely rebuilt in 1848. This church may be built on the site of an earlier Saxon church, but there's no concrete evidence to support that theory. The church is redundant and closed for worship these days, but the surrounding churchyard remains open and it's kept well maintained. Over the road is the Manor House, an 18th century limestone building. It's Grade 2 listed and dominates this little lane which leads away from Kirkby Green. With that, it's time to head off to the next one. To do that, we have to pass through a ford where Scopwick Beck crosses this narrow lane towards the village we're after. Next time, we'll be taking in another gorgeous little place, one with a really tall church spire and populated by plenty of sheep. See you soon. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.